The ideal intake team,
When it comes to the best structure, just generally speaking, you want to have your intakers into 2 to 3 groups. You want your best intakers touching your best leads. You want your next group of intakers that are following the leads after that. And then you want your newest intakers or your worst intakers, but the ones that you hope to improve to move up to those first and second teams. You want them backtracking the older leads. So the most important thing is to have your best intakers calling the best and freshest leads. You'll get the most signups that way.
and it's very nuanced. I don't think that many people do this, right? Think about your best leads and then giving it to your best intakers. But that little gap right there makes probably 15%, maybe 20% boost to your conversions right then and then just by doing that. And that means 20% more signups, means 20% more revenue, which means 20%, more money in your pocket. So
It's
great.
also motivation. It's also motivation for the intakers. They want to get to the top team. You can give that team, extra perks as well. We see that over 50% of the signups from any given firm all come from the top team, some as high as 65, 70%. So the top intakers are going to sign the most clients for you.
Then this one, having new intakers following up on older leads. Can you talk about older leads? What's our protocol with older leads?
Yeah, that after that 14 or maybe it's 30 days, depending on how you set things up in your practice type, you want to have people backtracking on those leads. You're going to get less of a conversion on those, but you will get the ones that 6 months later, they come and sign up, depending on your practice type. You'll also talk to people a couple months down the line, or maybe a month down the line, or whatever the case may be, that are unhappy with their current firm and want to leave it because they've fumbled the initial stages of their case. And then you'll also talk to people who may have thought they had an issue, then the issue came back. You're still following up with them. They talk to you, they sign up. Or, hey, they don't have that issue anymore, but they know a friend that has that issue. Hey, now let's get a referral from that. So following up, I have people following up, depending on the practice type, to like over a year since the lead first came in. And we sign those cases up, at obviously a lower clip than the newer leads, but we're still signing cases from those 30 days plus, 6 months plus leads.
Amazing. Couple of questions in the chat regarding the multiple choice questions. Should they be on the landing page or in the actual ad? Pedro, I'll just give you the short answer. Usually your pre-qualification screening questions are going to be in 3 different places. Either 1 on your landing page, number 2 on your Facebook lead forms or TikTok lead forms. If you don't know what that means probably need help on marketing. And number 3 on your Calendly or booking questions. That's the best place to ask your pre-screening questions. Amen. Question for you: do you see a conversion difference when intakers have an accent?
That's an interesting question because some of our best intakers have an accent. So I guess you can get away with an accent if you have really good sales skills and the accent is not affecting how the understanding of what you're trying to communicate to the client. But then again, if they don't have great sales skills, they don't have a mastery of the subject matter, and the accent is preventing them from effective communication, then yeah, it's probably going to be a detriment. But I wouldn't say an accent is a deal breaker. It's much more in the sales skills and the product knowledge than how they sound.
Yeah. And a couple of good other questions. Mark, I'm going to save that question. If you can bring it up at the end, we'll address it in detail. Zach also says, does the platform forms still work? Quality has been bad the last 3-4 months. Yes, Zach, they absolutely do work. There's always things that could be done about it, and we could go into more detail once we troubleshoot you personally set our program. But let's move on. Intake supervisor. Let's talk about what's an intake supervisor and why do we need one, Eamon?
All right. So if you are starting your law firm and you have a couple intakers and you're able to manage what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, you probably don't need a supervisor. But the moment that you can't spend a good portion of your day looking at the intakers' KPIs, listening to intakers' calls, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, doing everything that we outlined before us, you're going to need a supervisor to manage that team for you, to supervise that team. And as your team grows, you're going to need more supervisors. We have one firm where we have 3 supervisors and a manager. So as as you add people, you add sophistication, you're going to need middle management, leadership to be able to herd the team in the right direction. Yeah. So in a nutshell, as soon as you can't manage the team, you need a supervisor.
How many intakers per intake supervisor?
It's a tough question to answer. I don't like having, so here's how I do it. I don't like assigning 6 intakers to one supervisor and then they only report to that supervisor. I typically like to have supervisors working on shifts. So one supervisor is in at the start of the shift and another supervisor gets in halfway through and finishes the shift. And then they alternate like what day they're working on the weekends. That way there's always somebody in leadership there. And then you can have a larger team, 20, 30, 40 intakers, as long as there's a supervisor and some quality control there to manage the leads, watch the KPIs, and make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. The supervisor's main goal is to make sure people are being as productive as possible.
And you always, the way that I see this also is law firms, if you have a mentality of, oh, our team is good, then you don't have a good team. I mean, we should talk about this because we deal with this, right? Oh, I have the best intake. And I'm like, as soon as we hear that, we're like, oh God, how bad is it? Because it shows that you have no idea. Because if you had an idea, you wouldn't say that, first of all. And 2, you would say, we got a lot of work to do. And a lot of times, if you don't have somebody overseeing and actually listening in, and we'll talk about the next one, quality assurance, listening in on these calls, then you have no idea how bad some of these calls could be taken. And again, you may be blaming your marketing when the issue is actually your intake. So let's talk about that. That's actually a good segue to quality assurance. What does quality assurance do?
So quality assurance is, simply put, listening to the calls to make sure what you want your law firm to be projecting out to the public is actually happening. There's a couple different reasons to listen to calls. You can listen to calls to help improve a good intaker to a great intaker. You can listen to calls to help take a bad intaker or a new intaker to a good intaker. But there's also some very revealing things that you find on calls. At this point, within a year, we've probably fired 20 people or more, 20 intakers or more, just from what they said on a call. I remember one time we had a call where an intaker was, and said they were coming from a different company, a completely different industry. So they were obviously doing 2-time work. There's intakers that will just completely say wrong things or illegal things to the client. So you've got to also cover your back when you're listening to these calls. But then, of course, if you are taking a look at the calls in a systematic way, you can use the call score, I call it, as an additional KPI to measure the effectiveness of the intaker. I know we're going to talk about that in a second, but QA should be listening to 20 calls-ish a day and giving feedback sessions to the intakers, bare minimum on a weekly basis per intaker, ideally on like a daily or like every other day basis to the intakers to help take them to the next level. I know I just talked a lot there, Sam. Did I?
No, you're good. No, you're good. How many intakers would you say does it take until you need to get a quality assurance person?
I would say as soon as, at first, your supervisor is going to have to wear both hats. If you're at that like 3 to 5, 6 intakers, your supervisor is going to have to wear a couple hats. As soon as you get to a point where the supervisor can't do both of these roles, that's when you need a quality assurance person.
Okay, so just have in mind, I would say it's like probably 3 intakers. As soon as you have 3 intakers, then you need to have intake supervisor who also does the quality assurance. They're listening in, providing feedback on the calls on an ongoing basis. They're listening and reviewing a minimum of 20 calls daily. And again, I've seen a huge, both me and Eamon have seen a huge disparity between the good intakers, great intakers, the amazing intakers, the incredible intakers, and the best, and the person who's better than the best, right? I mean, our mind has been blown, right? But somebody who's amazing in our head, and then someone else comes who blows them out of the water. And we will never be able to know that. So we'll never be able to get to that point unless we have somebody coming behind, training, optimizing, listening to the things and how that person could get better and better. And that person who's into self-development and is willing to get better and better is the person who's always going to come out as the top intaker, which is going to drive most of the results for your law firm. and it's going to make a really big difference for your law firm. Really, like the difference between a really good law firm and a bad law firm is just really good intake team. So, and this is key. And then the quality assurance should provide a minimum of 5 feedback sessions daily. Eamon, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so listening to at least 20 calls. A lot of times the QAs will listen to a call a couple times to make sure they have good notes. And then the feedback sessions, they're actually talking to 5 intakers on a daily basis, looking at areas where they can improve, possibly showing great calls from another intaker to an intaker that could improve to be more like that successful intaker. It's just continuous training and optimizing of the intake team. If you do that, if you don't do that, you could have a great intaker that's great for 3 months and then tails off and you'll have no idea why. But if you're continuing to hit them with feedback sessions, refreshers, tips, tricks, things like that, they're going to continue to stay engaged. They're going to continue to get better, and they're going to continue to sign more clients. So that's why those feedback sessions super important.
Great. Angela, you asked a very good question about how to find these intakers and intake services, things like that. Let's wait. If you can, just ask that during the Q&A section because we have a lot to share there. And also one of the poll questions that I'm looking at right now, do you have a dedicated intaker? We need to address that in detail, but I want to save it for the Q&A session to go through that in detail. Let's quickly talk about business intelligence, Eamon.
Yeah, so business intelligence, that's where you have those project managers, business analysts, data analysts. That is the team that if you move past the legal funnel into the HubSpot world or the Salesforce world, you want a team that can build, optimize your more advanced CRM, and then you want a team that's going to go look at the data, the long-term data. Like Sam mentioned before, we look at every single data point throughout the workflow, throughout the pipeline of what the law firms we look at. That's what the data team is doing. They're putting that together. They're analyzing it, and then we as leaders can make decisions, can make tactical and strategic decisions about the firm, where to spend money, where to cut back, when can we expect settlements to come in, all those things are enabled by good data and a business intelligence team that can analyze and present that data in a way that leaders can make decisions on.